The moment you stepped into room 2141 of the Rayburn House office building, something felt off. It wasn't loud. It wasn't chaotic. It was cold, controlled, heavy with anticipation. The kind of silence that comes right before a storm, and everyone in the room knew something was coming. They just didn't know what. The polished mahogany tables gleamed under sterile fluorescent lights. 3 American flags stood perfectly still in their brass holders, silent witnesses to what was about to unfold. The smell of leather, floor wax, and faint cologne filled the air, mixed with tension so thick it could be cut. Flashes from press cameras flickered like distant lightning, their clicks sounding like ticking clocks. Time moved slowly here, and yet everything was about to change in minutes. At the center of it all sat Donald Trump, composed, confident, unbothered. His suit dark, absorbing the light like a shadow. His red tie perfectly knotted, slightly too long. He leaned back in his chair like a man used to being in control. To his left and right, a wall of lawyers, silent, watchful, prepared. Across the room sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. She didn't fidget. She didn't smile. Her navy blazer was sharp, and a small gold pin of Texas shined on her lapel. Before her lay a single leather folder, closed, silent, but filled with truth. She wasn't there to perform. She was there to reveal, to do what few had dared to do in that room before, hold the powerful accountable, and the air knew it. In the back row of the public gallery, beneath the harsh congressional lights, sat a young man with a Washington Nationals cap pulled low over his brow. He was tall, still, almost invisible in the sea of staffers, reporters, and curious citizens. No one looked twice. No one whispered his name. To the cameras and committee members, he was just another silent face in the crowd. But that face belonged to Barron Trump. He didn't come to observe. He came to change everything. His hands were clasped tightly in his lap. His posture was upright, almost military in its discipline. But the only giveaway of his inner storm were his knuckles, white from the pressure. He watched his father across the room, the man the world called powerful, untouchable, unbreakable. But Barron knew something the room didn't. He knew this wasn't a political theater. This was a reckoning. And he had brought the match. What makes a son rise against the man who raised him? What breaks inside a child when silence becomes more unbearable than betrayal? As Barron sat quietly in that cold congressional chamber, 1,000 memories flickered behind his eyes. He remembered being 6 years old, hiding behind velvet curtains in Trump Tower, listening to arguments that never made the news. He remembered the birthday dinners where power was celebrated more than presence. He remembered the praise when he stayed silent, and the disapproval when he asked questions. Justice wasn't something he learned from his father. It was something he discovered, piece by piece, in law classes, in late-night debates, and in the stories of people who looked nothing like him but fought the same systems his family benefited from. Now, he was no longer a boy protected by wealth. He was a man standing on principle. But would he be strong enough? Strong enough to stare down his father in front of cameras, lawyers, and a country hungry for drama? Strong enough to lose a fortune, just to keep his soul? He didn't know the answer. But in that moment, he knew the question mattered more. The chairman's gavel struck once, sharp and final. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Crockett, for 5 minutes. Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, adjusted her microphone with one smooth motion, and locked eyes with the man sitting across from her. "Good morning, Mr. Trump," she said, her voice calm but razor-sharp. Trump gave a lazy nod, waving a dismissive hand like he was swatting away a fly. Let's get this over with. I've got real business to handle. Crockett didn't flinch. I'd like to begin with a question about federal contracting law, she said, pulling a yellow legal pad closer. Specifically, the requirements outlined in Federal Acquisition Regulation 52.219-8 regarding minority business enterprise participation. Trump exhaled with exaggerated boredom. "Oh, please," he scoffed. "Nobody has done more for minority businesses than me. You can check the numbers. Tremendous numbers. Historic." Several committee members exchanged glances. Crockett waited a beat, then another. "No one's questioning your numbers just yet, Mr. Trump," she said, still steady. "I'm asking if you're familiar with the law." He shrugged. "My people handle the paperwork. The best people. They know the rules." "And do you personally ensure compliance?" she pressed. Trump smiled, smug. "That's what I pay them for. I don't micromanage contracts. I build buildings. Big ones." Crockett didn't blink. The opening salvo had been fired. And while Trump thought he was dodging bullets, he didn't realize the real shots hadn't been fired yet. Crockett reached for her folder. Not the black one marked Prep, not the slim one labeled Talking Points. She reached for the thick leather-bound binder, color-coded and quiet, until now. Yellow, blue, red. 3 folders, 3 strikes. The sound of paper sliding against paper echoed louder than any shout. She opened the yellow one first. "Mr. Trump," she began, holding up a page. "According to your company's own filings, 23% of your federally funded contracts between 2017 and 2023 were reported as involving minority-owned businesses. Is that correct?" Trump straightened slightly, sensing the trap but still holding his grin. "Sounds right," he replied. "Tremendous inclusion. We do very well in that category." Crockett nodded once, without emotion, then opened the blue folder. On the committee's screen, a Treasury Department report appeared. A graph. A damning line. "But that 23%, she continued, only reflects registration. Treasury analysis shows that only 4.3% of actual payments went to those minority-owned businesses." Silence. Camera shutters clicked. Audible gasps. A staffer dropped a pen. Crockett moved to the red folder without pause. "In fact," she said, placing another document under the camera, "the remaining funds were reallocated through change orders to non-minority vendors." Quietly. Repeatedly. Trump's jaw tightened. The committee room no longer felt like a hearing. It felt like a trial. And Crockett was just getting started. Jasmine Crockett's voice stayed steady, but the weight of what she was about to say pressed down like a hammer. She pulled out a printed email from a bright yellow folder, sliding it under the camera lens for everyone to see. "Mr. Trump," she began, eyes locked on his, "this email, dated April 3rd, 2022, was sent from your son, Donald Jr., to your chief financial officer. In it, he asks about, and I quote, the usual process for hitting minority numbers on the D.C. project." Trump's smile faltered. Crockett didn't stop. "The reply from your CFO mentions a standard workaround and instructs that any final vendor switches must be cleared with you." A hush fell over the room. The words hung heavy in the air. Standard workaround. Final vendor switches. Code for what everyone in that room already suspected. Trump's fingers drummed nervously on the table. His eyes darted to his attorneys, but Crockett was far from finished. She flipped to another document, a spreadsheet with highlighted notes. "In May 2022, you specifically instructed, and again I quote, make the reports look good, but move the real money to our regular people. The room erupted with quiet shock. Trump's face darkened. He raised his hand sharply to cut off the microphones. "This is a witch hunt," he barked. "They've taken my words out of context, fabricated evidence, a political hit job." But for everyone watching, he'd just admitted to a carefully orchestrated cover-up. Crockett's gaze never wavered. The trap was sprung, and Donald Trump had walked right into it. The room had been tense, but now it went completely still. Jasmine Crockett looked directly at Donald Trump, her voice calm but heavy with meaning. "Mr. Trump," she said slowly, "the source of these internal documents, the emails, the affidavits, the evidence, was provided to this committee by someone very close to you." She paused. All eyes locked on Trump. She dropped the words that would stop every breath in the room. "Your son, Barron Trump." The silence was deafening. Cameras froze. Reporters gasped. Trump's confident posture crumbled. His face went pale. His body stiffened. The air seemed to crackle with disbelief and shock. For the first time, the mighty Donald Trump sat speechless, caught in a storm he never saw coming. And in that moment, the true battle began. Donald Trump's face twisted in disbelief. "That's impossible!" he snapped, his voice rising into a shout. "He's just a kid. He doesn't know anything about business, about politics." His hands clenched the edges of the table like a man trying to hold onto control, slipping through his fingers. But Jasmine Crockett remained unmoved. She leaned in, her eyes sharp and unyielding. "Mr. Trump," she said firmly, "he's 20 years old now, and he's watching. Every move, every lie." The room seemed to shrink around Trump's growing fury. The power he wielded for decades suddenly felt fragile. Fragile as a secret exposed under harsh light. For the first time, the walls he built with wealth and influence trembled. Because the boy he called just a kid had become the one wielding the truth. Suddenly, the room seemed to hold its breath. Barron Trump slowly lifted his hand. Fingers gripping the brim of his national's cap, he pulled it off with deliberate calm. The camera's whirred, lenses zoomed in. His face, young, serious, a mix of resolve and regret, was exposed to every eye in the chamber. The silence was absolute. No one spoke. No one moved. Because some truths don't need words. They wear the face of your own blood. Barron's gaze met his father's across the room, steady and unwavering. The quietest act of rebellion often speaks the loudest. And in that moment, the world understood. Months before the hearing, Barron sat alone in a sterile office inside Trump Organization. He was tasked with a simple summer internship, filing paperwork, shadowing executives. But one afternoon, an email chain accidentally landed in his inbox, an email that didn't seem right. The language was vague but telling. Adjust the numbers. Make the reports look good. Final vendor switches. Barron reread the messages, feeling a cold knot tightening in his stomach. This wasn't just business as usual. This was something else. Weeks later, in a cramped classroom at Georgetown Law School, Barron found himself debating a topic that gnawed at his conscience. Saying, "Follow the rules," is not enough when the rules are being bent to deceive, the professor argued. Barron listened, then challenged. If the law lets you get away with hurting others, is it really justice, or just a loophole for the powerful? The room fell silent. That conversation planted a seed in Barron's mind, a seed of doubt, of responsibility, of courage. It was the moment he realized he couldn't stay silent any longer. Barron tried. He really did. He brought up the emails in quiet moments, between family dinners, behind closed doors. He spoke to his older brothers, hoping for support. But they laughed him off, called him soft, told him he was just like Mom. When he tried to confront his father, the words were sharper. "Focus on your studies. Leave the business to us." The dismissal was a punch to the gut. Barron felt the weight of isolation, surrounded by blood, yet utterly alone. The hardest betrayal isn't from enemies. It's from those who should have stood beside you. He carried that pain silently, knowing his voice wasn't just a plea. It was a battle cry, for justice, for truth, for the chance to be heard. It was Christmas Eve. Most families exchanged gifts, laughter filling cozy rooms. But Barron lay awake in his room, the muffled voices from the next room slicing through the quiet night. He couldn't ignore what he overheard. His father and CFO discussing cleaning the numbers, whispers about manipulating minority contract reports, making the books look good while the real money flowed elsewhere. The weight of that moment crushed him. He knew then he stood at a crossroad. To stay silent was to be complicit. To speak out was to risk everything. But Barron didn't hesitate. He picked up his phone. He reached out to Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's office. "This isn't politics," he told himself, voice barely a whisper. "This is about what's right." That night, Barron Trump chose truth, and with it, he chose a path that would change his life forever. The night air was cold and still as Barron approached the Lincoln Memorial. Marble steps stretched before him, bathed in the soft glow of floodlights. The towering statue of Abraham Lincoln loomed silently, an eternal witness to America's struggles for justice and unity. Minutes later, Donald Trump appeared from the opposite direction, his silhouette heavy with years of power and conflict. They stood side by side, two figures cast in stark contrast, youth and age, idealism and legacy, truth and denial. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the distant hum of the city filled the space between them. Trump finally broke the silence, voice low but firm. "You know, they tried to cancel him too," he said, gesturing toward Lincoln's statue. Barron met his father's gaze steadily. "This isn't about canceling, Dad," he replied. "It's about accountability." The memorial's cold stone seemed to echo the weight of their words. Beneath the watchful eyes of a nation's past, father and son faced their hardest truth yet. Donald Trump's eyes narrowed, the glow from the memorial casting sharp shadows across his face. He turned slowly to face his son, voice low but laced with challenge. "What do you want, Barron?" he asked, every word heavy with expectation. "What's your price? What will it take to make this all go away?" Barron met his father's gaze, unflinching. "I want truth," he said quietly, but with unshakable conviction. "That's not something you can buy. Not with money. Not with power." Trump's jaw clenched. The question hung in the air like a challenge thrown down. Because some things, like truth, can't be traded. They can only be earned. And Barron had already made his choice. The moment Barron's truth hit the airwaves, the world exploded. Barron's truth surged to the top of social media trends overnight. News outlets scrambled to catch up, flashing headlines of a son turning against his powerful father. The Department of Justice swiftly opened a formal investigation into the Trump Organization's minority contracting practices. Within weeks, 3 top executives at Trump Organization were indicted. Donald Trump himself was named an unindicted co-conspirator, publicly linked but legally untouched. The shock waves rippled through politics, business, and families alike. For a nation divided, Barron's revelation was a seismic shift, a rare moment when bloodlines couldn't shield corruption. But the cost was immediate and personal. Barron found himself isolated within his own family. Walls built by years of loyalty now felt like barriers. Trump's legal team launched aggressive motions, invoking family privilege to silence Barron's testimony. The fight spilled into courtrooms and newsrooms alike. Ivanka Trump, visiting quietly, expressed concern but struggled to sway her youngest brother. Despite the pressure, Barron stood firm. He refused to back down, not for fame, not for fortune. His decision had fractured his family, but it had also sparked a movement. Barron's journey was far from over. He officially joined Congresswoman Crockett's office as a legal mentorship participant. No cameras, no spotlights, just quiet, steady work serving communities often ignored. He wasn't chasing headlines. He was chasing justice. From drafting memos to meeting with small business owners, Barron found purpose. Not as an heir to a fortune, but as a servant to the truth. His new path was hard, but it was real, and it was his own. In the heart of Southeast Washington, a new beacon of hope was rising. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett stood before a crowd gathered at the grand opening of the Minority Business Support Center. This center, born from the truth revealed by Barron Trump's testimony, was more than just bricks and mortar. It was a promise to those who had been sidelined, ignored, and denied fair opportunity for far too long. Business owners who had once been pushed out of contracts due to manipulation were now given a real chance to compete. The walls echoed with the buzz of hopeful entrepreneurs, ready to build, grow, and reclaim their rightful place. Jasmine's voice rang clear. This is justice in action, not charity, not special treatment, simply fairness, and the opportunity every American deserves. Barron stood quietly at the back, watching. He wasn't the spotlight. He was the spark, and the rebuild had only just begun. As the crowd began to disperse, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett took a moment to speak to the press. "Justice isn't loud," she said quietly, her voice steady and unwavering. "It's methodical, patient, relentless, and it needs brave people like Barron. People willing to stand up when it's easier to stay silent." She glanced toward Barron, who stood tall, his expression calm but fierce with determination. Barron stepped forward, speaking without hesitation. "I didn't walk away from wealth," he said, his voice clear and honest. "I walked toward who I wanted to become." With that, he turned and walked away from the cameras, away from the headlines. A final walk toward a future built on truth, integrity, and purpose. And though the road ahead would be hard, it was one he chose, freely, bravely, and without regret. In the quiet aftermath, a young man stood apart from the empire his family had built. He had turned his back on fortune, not out of rebellion, but out of conviction. A legacy redefined, not by wealth or power, but by courage and truth. And now, the question lingers, echoing beyond the walls of Washington, beyond the headlines. If you were born into power built on injustice, would you walk away? Would you choose what's right over what's easy? Barron Trump chose, and his choice challenges us all. This story reminds us that true courage isn't about wealth, status, or power. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it means standing alone. No matter where you come from or what you inherit, integrity and honesty are the foundation of a meaningful life. It teaches us that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the greatest growth, and that real change begins with one brave voice willing to speak the truth. In your own life, remember, standing up for justice may not always be easy, but it is always necessary. Your values define you, not your circumstances. And sometimes, walking away from what's comfortable leads you closer to who you truly want to become. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe to your channel name for for more powerful stories that uncover truth, challenge injustice, and inspire courage. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss an eye-opening episode. Together, let's stand for justice, expose the truth, and build a better future.